All right, hello and welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to just collectively unpack the impact of AI, artificial intelligence tools, and more specifically how they've evolved since our last session in April, in spring last year. This is a follow-up to that, a kind of a part two based on what we learned and all that has evolved since then. We're going to be sharing examples of AI, their uses, their limitations, ways you can think about them in your own practice and for your learners as well. And then we're also going to have a panel of faculty to share their experiences using AI and what we can learn from them as well. So I'm very excited to be here, joined by our colleague, James Nelson, who is a resident expert in AI. So thank you so much for being here with us, James. And we're going to kick things off. We're going to begin by just kind of sharing a really quick example. And James can tell you a little bit more about this, about what AI is capable of in this short video.
Now we're stuck in a tower in the middle of nowhere. And I don't blame you, and now we're stuck on this stupid freaking tower in the middle of freaking nowhere. And it's all my fault. Es todo por mi culpa. Now we're stuck on this stupid tower in the middle of...
So I'll stop with the F-bombs there, but again, AI is taking this original scene and is able to not only edit the sound and images, but also the language within it. And again, James can tell you a little bit more, not only about how AI has evolved, but also what it's capable of now.
Thanks, Amber, and thanks everybody for joining us today. The video you just saw was from a company called Flawless AI, and I know, like, for me, it was kind of choppy when it played back, so I don't know if Zoom did that for you too or not. So if you want to view that video in its native format, you can, Flawless AI is the website, you can just Google it. But what they're doing, right, is using deepfake and generative AI in the film industry to take dialogue. In this case, it's dialogue that was R-rated, and their AI can remove the dialogue completely. So it makes it so you can't hear it. Her mouth doesn't really move. She just kind of pantomimes it. It can be downgraded to PG-13, where the AI changes both the voice acting and the facial features to remove to replace the foul language with more PG or PG-13 language. And then, of course, they're using it to convert the films into different languages. And then AI uses the actor's voice and can use that voice to change it into that language so they appear to be a native speaker. In addition to it updates the mouth movements so that they match the words. And so it's a seamless viewing experience around the globe. So that increases your accessibility. Another example of that that's actually being used here, or not here at Park, but here in the United States, the mayor of New York recently did some robocalls, and his message was, they used this kind of technology to change his message into Mandarin and several other languages. And now he's getting stopped on the street saying, "I didn't know you spoke Mandarin." And of course he's like, "I don't." and so you can see the applications for accessibility with lecture capture, things like that. These tools are out there. They're being used all over the place already. And so really that goes into what we're talking about now, is with the evolution of generative AI. And when we met, 6 months ago, right? A lot of these tools were fairly new. They were coming soon, look for this stuff, or this is what they're working on. Well, now all those things are here. and they're built into almost all of our applications, right? So one of these things in IT that we always talk about is Moore's Law, and I kind of call it out there, but it's basically a rule of thumb that technology doubles every 18 to 24 months, right? Well, AI is doubling almost on a weekly basis. It is getting so fast, so new constantly, that we as users, we as producers of content don't have a lot of time to adapt to the changing environment as a result. So it's certainly a challenge from that standpoint. So let's talk about ChatGPT, right? Version 4 got released right around the same time as we met last year. But in that time, ChatGPT can now not only read what you write, but it can hear what you say, it can speak back to you, and it can see. So as an example, last week I took a picture of a grade school worksheet that was an article on king cobras, and it had a multiple choice assignment underneath it. And I asked ChatGPT, I just gave it that image and asked it to answer the questions on the sheet. And so it read the article, it digested the content, and it properly answered all the questions. I've seen similar demos with high-end mathematics where they break down the assignment and how to solve the individual problems. So the capabilities of generative AI just within the ChatGPT framework have like quadrupled. I mean, it's going crazy. On that front, then you have companies like Microsoft, Google, Adobe, and even Zoom, who have already built these tools into their products. So if you're running the latest version of Office, you have generative AI built into your application. So you can, in PowerPoint, you can generate images and notes and even text, right, for a presentation. In Word, it will suggest paragraphs as you're going. In Outlook, it can summarize message threads. It can give you a suggested response to a message. Even in your browser, right? If you have the latest version of Bing, Copilot is built within there. So it can help you summarize info on the pages you're looking at and things like that. So these tools are now everywhere. And so it's only a matter of time. Like Google Bard is doing the same thing in all their Google apps. Adobe, if you use Adobe products, for example, Photoshop, you can use generative fill. So if you want to edit, gone are the days of having to click around a person to cut out the background. You can just select subject and then have generative fill create a whole new background for you. Within Adobe Premiere, they demoed somebody taking an image of a guy wearing a suit, but he didn't have a tie on, and they wanted a tie. So they kind of created a little area, asked Adobe to fill in with a tie. And then from that image, they pushed play, and it was actually Adobe Premiere. And the person walks down the stairs and down the street, and the tie is with them and moves naturally with them all the way down the street. Right. So these tools are there, and they're everywhere. Again, I mentioned Zoom. There's actually a webinar, I think it's tomorrow or the next day, on how the Zoom companion can help take notes within meetings and summarize what was said. It's the amount of tools are just everywhere at this point. The next thing is realistic images. Midjourney is probably the best known image generator, but recently OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, released a new model of their image generation tool called DALL-E 3. And just like Midjourney, it can generate images that are pretty realistic or hyper realistic, but they've solved the text problem. So with a roughly 75 to 90% success rate, you can now generate images with text within them that is perfectly accurate. So in the first slide you saw on the intro to this slide deck was an example of that. You'll notice there's a sign that's kind of like superimposed there, but that whole thing was generated by DALL-E 3, and DALL-E 3 put that sign in there with the ethical AI use only, right? So you can get much more elaborate images for presentations and things like that out of DALL-E 3. And if you're subscribed to ChatGPT Plus, you have DALL-E 3 at your disposal right within ChatGPT. So one tool now that can do all these different things. One of the last things I wanted to talk about was video, right? I kind of mentioned the stuff that Adobe Premiere was doing. You saw the stuff that Flawless is doing, but people are generating, right now it's about 15 to 20 seconds. You can take an image and turn it into an animation using AI. You can, even in Adobe Premiere, I have this problem myself. I tend to use a lot of filler words like uhs and ums, right? Trying to get better at speaking. With a click of a button, Adobe Premiere can remove those now with AI. It can identify where they are. It edits the videos for you, and it's just gone. So the ability to do these things is now at your fingertips. Most places it's free or built within the tools that you already own, and they're just giving them to you. So the pressure from an academic perspective, right? There's a lot of positive benefits from that as you can use it throughout what you're doing, but it'll also be at the hands of students. So again, understanding where those use cases are is critical. So I'll pass it back to Amber to talk about some of the ways that AI can benefit you, what you do.
Yeah, thank you, James. And I love the examples that you give, because I think a lot of times we can't even comprehend what's capable, and the different ways we could even be using AI. And so we want to share a few of those things with you as well, in terms of what has advanced in the last 6 months. So before, in April last spring, we were talking about how you could have ChatGPT and some of these generative AI tools be able to help create an outline for your course or your presentation that you could then customize, or to pull some cited resources or data or that type of thing. Now you can create entire workflows to assist with that. So for example, and as James mentioned, it's now all in the products themselves. It's in Microsoft. It's already in Google. There's no more beta testing of this. It is directly embedded. And a lot of the tools we're already using, you just may not know they're there or necessarily how to use them. You can also run your own AI models. So there are home versions that are completely unrestricted now. So for example, I could have AI help me improve my resume and help me write a cover letter. I could actually use AI to act as an interviewer and practice my interviewing skills, and then assess my performance and give me feedback on that. I could use AI and build a workflow where, let's say I have an RSS feed or information that I want it to pull directly from. So I want to know what's happening just from, let's say I'm preparing for this presentation for AI, and I want the latest information, if anything AI related is published in the New York Times or in the Chronicle, or maybe let's just say there's 3 or 4 sources in particular I want to kind of scrape the information for. I can put that all into a workflow where that is automatically pulled. It then uses AI to summarize all of that information, and then can send me an email with a bulleted list of the key points. That is where I can create my own customized AI generated workflow, and I didn't have to do anything except set it up. And so I could get daily or weekly updates of all of the information that's very specifically curated by what are only the resources I want to get it from, and then it's emailed directly to me. Or so, for example, James might send an email each day of articles that he wants to read more about. And as I mentioned, you can also use Canva to build video shorts. So let's say, and James, maybe you could expand on this in terms of, a YouTube channel that you might create where you want to have new content dropped every week. this could help you create a workflow to do that would take no more than 5 minutes to review. So there are some pretty complex tasks that AI tools can now break down the complex tasks into smaller tasks. They can intelligently complete those tasks and break them down even further until it ultimately is that workflow is created entirely by AI and sent directly to you. And you can download this on your own computer at home through, I think, make.com and what are the other ones? I think it was feedly.com. So those are some options. And again, you can just kind of use different apps to inject AI in the communication between them now. So it's not just about using one AI tool for ChatGPT, for example. It's about creating a workflow to simplify how information could be delivered to you and where specifically it's coming from. So again, that's just another example of automating workflow. In addition to some of the things we had talked about last spring, it can help, with presentations, with readability, or even, as James mentioned, even improving the videos that you create yourself, where you can remove all those ums and uhs. And I do the same thing. So it's a really great way to really improve the professionalism, streamline it, and also just make it more professional overall. James, would you mind sharing what you've done in terms of the video segments that you've created for some of your, I can't remember if it's a YouTube channel that you have or something else, but that we had talked about when we were even discussing. James and I have had so many great fun conversations as we were preparing for this. And there continues to be things released every single day, it seems like. Even last Friday, there was just new information released from Meta. But James, if you could give the example of how you're using that automated workflow to help assist in that content creation for you as well, I think people would really benefit from that.
Yeah, so sure. I, as Amber mentioned, I have a personal YouTube channel that I use for all things nerd, right? So it's by no means a professionally done channel, and it's very small. So, but I use it to experiment with a lot of this kind of stuff. And so what I wanted to do was leverage both Canva, ChatGPT, and then YouTube Shorts to generate basically daily content that would allow me to basically automate it. So I don't have to really do anything other than, maybe sit back or one day spend a little bit of time. And so what I did was take the approach of making riddles about video games as an example, right? So these are designed for retro gamers, and I told ChatGPT, basically give me a list of riddles, right, based around retro video games, and I want you to give me a title for the riddle. I want you to give me the riddle itself. I want you to give me multiple choice answers, and then I want you to give me the answer. And I want it formatted in a CSV, right? And I want, say, 30 of those. And so eventually I got to where it gave me 90. So I had 3 groups of 30. And then going into Canva, I set up simply, I took the very first one and just made a quick short using Canva's tool, which lets you choose backgrounds, people, flyouts, text, you name it. You can do this all within Canva. And Canva also has some generative AI capabilities to help you find images and create images and things you want to use. So once I had that template, I was able to use Canva's built-in tools to read from the Google sheet I created out of the CSV from ChatGPT to generate those videos. So it can load in that CSV and generate a unique video for every one of those riddles. And then I just upload them all to YouTube with a future release date for each one. And now for the next 3 months, I don't have to do anything. It's just going to post those things out there. So those are the kinds of things where I spent maybe an hour to an hour and a half doing all of that. And now it's reduced what would take somebody on their own doing it maybe an hour per video to do that content. So it gets, by using these AI tools, I'm able to cut down, a fraction of the effort to produce this kind of stuff, right? Productivity through the roof. So I'm sure you can already imagine some of the things you want to do with AI to help you, how it can assist you throughout your day. But really, before you dive feet first, there's some things you probably should consider before leveraging it. One of the first things on here is guidance that was provided by the U.S. Copyright Office. This came out after our last meeting and after a few rulings. And ideally, what they're telling us is that you cannot copyright anything that was created by generative AI, meaning was it the result of what they say is a mechanical reproduction. So if you just type in a prompt, you take what the prompt gives you and try to turn that into a book, or you generate an image and you go out and sell that image or whatever, you have no copyright protection from the Copyright Office. However, if you use generative AI's output to create something new that you've substantially altered in some way, and the US Patent Office gives an example of maybe you generate 3 different images and then you combine them into a collage. That final product can be copyrighted, so you're protected from there and how you use the stuff, but the underlying images that you generated can't be. So it's kind of this gray area. They're looking at issues on a case-by-case basis to make that determination. As there's no real presiding law or legal precedent yet, this is what they're falling back to based on older rulings. So it's important to understand what you're doing and what you're how you are or are not protected in your use of generative AI. One of the other chief concerns is understanding how your AI model was trained. So this gets back into the ethical use of data. When you use something like Midjourney or even DALL-E 3, those models were likely all trained on copyrighted images, right? They scoured the internet, they scoured repositories, and they just used anything they found and included it in there. That's been met with lawsuits and concerns from artists. And so those companies now have taken the steps of letting those artists opt out of their models in future. Google themselves has released instructions for how to protect your website from being ingested by their AI model. But then there are other companies that go way beyond that. So Adobe Firefly is a good one. They're an image generation tool that's produced by Adobe, and it used only public, unlicensed, data that is in the public domain. So when you use something like Adobe Firefly, you can be protected from not necessarily using things you shouldn't. There's still, again, court cases going on about this to decide what's ethical and what's not, or what's legal and what's not, from that standpoint. But you should know that going into it when you're going to use something, what you might encounter out there. On that artist front, there are also a number of artists that have signed on to a counter letter saying, these AI models are good for art because they democratize art, and people that might not have the natural ability or the skills can now generate images that are in their head, and that just makes art more accessible to people. On the other front is security and privacy. This is a big one. So when you're using some of these large language models, they can use the data you submit to them in most instances. So you need to understand how and what they're using. So for example, when you use ChatGPT, anything you put into the chat window on their website can be used by them to train future models. Now, they do offer a way to opt out of that. And our recommendation would be you probably should opt out of it. But, with opting out, you lose some functionality. So one of the nicer things about ChatGPT is that it can remember past conversations, and you can go back to them and continue those. Well, when you opt out of their training model, right, in their online chat tool, you lose that capability. If you use things like their API, on the other hand, they have guaranteed that they do not use that data to train their models. So what a lot of companies do and what a lot of other people do is they'll build their own chatbot and then use the ChatGPT API to power it, so that they're not sharing they're not having that data be consumed by ChatGPT itself. So companies like Apple have basically banned its use when they found source code in it because their employees were using it. Others have taken that step to build a model. In fact, just this morning, I was playing with a new tool called Mind Studio that lets you create your own chatbot for free. You can use any of these or most of these large language models. So it has the various versions of ChatGPT. It has Anthropic's Claude, which is a competitor to ChatGPT, which is actually a more ethical version, and is one that researchers are using more so than ChatGPT. So it's an interesting one. If you haven't taken a look at it, I recommend you take a look at Claude. It's fairly new, again, free to use for now. But this Mind Studio, I was able to take our public solution articles, upload them into Mind Studio, and then use ChatGPT to create a chatbot. And again, took me maybe 15 minutes. And now I have a Park University chatbot that can answer questions about anything we have in our solution article. So it's by no means a finished product. It's something I just threw together, but it does work. So if you want to play with it, you can play with it here. Again, it's was completely free to set up and use. So these are the kinds of things, like using a tool like this will bypass what ChatGPT is doing with learning on their own AI model and using your data. Now, it doesn't mean this company won't use your data. So again, that's why I only used publicly available information for that chatbot. But so again, keep that in mind before you use any of these AI tools, is what are you putting at risk, and should you put that at risk at that stage? Finally, I put on here, right, we've crossed the Rubicon. So obviously we know of the ethical issues with using AI in the academic space, but one of the bigger things that a lot of us had feared with the use of AI was more in the societal space, the impact on society as a whole, from everything from news to war to you name it, to cybersecurity, where that's going to be. And unfortunately, one of the major presidential campaigns, right, in this upcoming election has already used generative AI in order to produce ads that make a claim that may or may not be true, but they used images that were clearly not real, right? They were passed off as real. In fact, the ad itself made the claim that this was real life, but they were all generated by AI. And so that pretty much is a boundary I think nobody thought people would like so quickly cross. But it's been crossed, which means this is going to happen more and more often. So as you think about what you see, you now have to take the added step of verifying, because what you see may not be accurate. So we've seen a lot of that in the actions, the unfortunate incidents that have happened overseas recently. We're seeing a lot more people try to pass off edited videos, images that were done by AI in order to manipulate whatever viewpoint they want to manipulate. And so the point is that, even though these tools are great, they have risks to them. So again, ethical use is should be the center of your thinking when using these tools, because that's really the only barrier we have right now. So.
And even as James mentioned that, there's also just in the last 6 months, the EU and even the US government are creating guidelines around AI use. And so I think we're going to continue to see more of those evolve in the months ahead. I know in the EU, they've also created different levels. I think there's 3 different levels of risk, red, yellow, and green, in terms of which levels of risk each AI tool has. So those are things to consider. I think also as faculty, you're also going to see more contracts are going to be a little bit different now. So for example, I've done side consulting projects in the past. And for example, right now I'm creating a short course for Coursera. And this is the first contract I've received that explicitly states you are not allowed to use any AI generated content at all within the creation of any content for this short course. So I think we're also going to see how that changes and evolves in terms of content creation in academia as well. And to that point, we wanted to spend the rest of our time today being able to talk directly to faculty who are using AI in terms of, it's great. I think James and I have kind of given you a broader picture in terms of how generative AI has evolved in the last 6 months, but we want to talk to faculty about how they are using it in their classes, in their practice, and then also lessons learned. So we're going to spend the remainder of our time with our excellent panelists who are joining us today and who we're so happy to have here with us, Doctors Matthew, Jenkins, and Carmenaty, who have also been using AI. And we're looking forward to just learning from them, from their experiences, and would like to open it up for questions as well for these folks. I'd like to kick things off with the question to each of you. We'd love to know a bit about your overall thoughts on using AI and how you've integrated it into your own practice. So if you guys don't mind just taking a quick turn at that, and then we'll open it up for additional questions as well. I'm going to stop the share here so that way we can see everyone's faces.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Eugene Matthews, and one of the ways that well, first off, my thought is that AI should be a help, not a hindrance. Much like we, back in the day, spent a lot of time with trying to figure out how to get cell phones out of the classroom and how to get computers and tablets out of the hands of the students and whatnot. And on that same train, we were also, sorry, cancel. Computer, cancel.
Speaking of,
I happen
and also,
to.
For those of you who want the view of the speaker, you can click that top right button that says view. If you don't want it on the gallery view, if you just want it on the speaker view, you can change that as well. Sorry, just go ahead. Go ahead, Eugene.
That's all right. So along those same lines, we used to use something called a Turnitin, and we use that for plagiarism software. So I take all 3 of those components, put them together, and look at AI as a way of not looking at AI as a way of saying, hey, I got you because you did something wrong, and I've been waiting for you to mess up so that I could hammer you. But looking at it more as an you didn't check your sources when you reported those. You didn't do X, Y, and Z. Or hey, I see you've got your phone on in the classroom. Here's how I want you to use it while you're in the classroom. What I've seen, at least across a lot of different domains, is this tendency to try and figure out how to beat AI. That's really kind of an unproductive waste of your time and energy. Why fight against, I know these students have used AI and they created this report with this, and they did this with that, and now I got them. You can chase that ball down the road like all day long and never get anywhere. So rather than do that, I say all that to say what Dr. Carmenaty and Dr. Jenkins and I kind of went to was, yes, it's there, and here's how we can use it for good, or here's how it can be used in a positive manner, or here's how we might be able to use it in our classrooms to advance what it is that we're doing. That's my 2 cents.
Well, so I think it's important for me to disclose that I came into this kicking and screaming, not our session today, but just the whole AI to begin with. Dianna reminded me the other day, because I've been using it now for a while and I'm okay, but she reminded me how crazy I was in December. I was absolutely crazy last December. My son is an IT business partner in the healthcare information technology services at University of Kansas Healthcare. That's a mouthful. James, I might have to ask you one day to come up to Holly Hall and tell me what my son does, because I don't have any idea whatsoever what he does. But he's the first one in December, and I found his email. I won't read it to you, but I found his email from December when this first came on my radar. And he even though he's IT now, he does have a criminal justice degree. So he gave me this big long answer to a criminal justice topic that we have. And he said, what do you think of that? And I said, wow, son. I said, you remember a lot about criminal justice. I'm really amazed. And he said, no. And then he blows my mind and tells me that this was all Chat GPT, blah, blah, blah. Never heard of it. I remember, well, Dianna remembered, I didn't remember. She remembers me walking into her office, slamming this email down on her desk and saying, it's the end of the world as we know it. We're never going to recover in this world and in this space. And now here I am, this short time later, to tell you that I've made my peace with it. And I actually do enthusiastically use it now. I can't even believe I'm saying it, that that's true, but it is. And basically, I think one of the main ways, so I tell my students, I created an AI policy in the spring as to my expectations on, I just said, we can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's not going to happen. So let's move forward. I already know you all are going to use it. And so let's talk about how we're going to use it. So I actually created a few little assignments to do in class, because amazingly in the spring, there was a small handful of students who hadn't heard about it. So I was actually giving them all this information, but a majority of them had known about it already. And so we played around with it. We looked at things like, well, if we type in what we would like to have chat talk about, a topic, what does it say versus what the textbook or other scholarly sources, so it kind of was a little window to open up some differences that we can see in these AI models like chat as far as the things that they answer. So I hold them accountable for how they use it. And basically for me, it's pretty simple. To me, it's just like any other source. I want to see where they've used it. I want to cite it. I don't even know what APA citation for AI is supposed to look like. I don't care. Throw it in parentheses. Tell me what you used. Tell me when you used it. Pulled it out. At least I can see, and I'm holding them to the same accountability of, this is supposed to be your words. I want this to be your brainchild. I don't want to know all of what chat or somebody else or whoever tells about the issue, but you can use it in this manner. And so I'm finding that even now as fall 2 classes have started, and I don't know about anyone else who's used it, but after you've used it a little bit, you begin to recognize its voice. It almost becomes like any other student that you've got, and you begin to, over time, learn their patterns of thinking and talking, if you will. And so I'm getting better, not perfect, but I'm getting better about just seeing it, recognizing it when I see it. And so I just, for fall 2 at least, have had a number of students that have just, that whole thing they just put on that discussion board, it wasn't them. It was all that. I recognized it. I mean, there wasn't even a bother to change it. And so, that opened the door for conversations. I'm not throwing fits. I'm just saying, please recall our policy in the syllabus about the use of AI, et cetera, et cetera. This is week 1. I'm going to give a lot of grace. I start seeing it next week. Maybe not so much grace, So I think it's just, for me, I use it in that way. I use it for, I wanted a unique and interesting introduction for fall 2, rather than just like I'm in the class because I have to, and my goal is to graduate, or, how some of those are already built into our or on Canvas for the introduction. To me, that's boring. And so I offered a few extra credit points for doing something cool. And I ask, AI, like, give me some ideas, 2 or 3 ideas of fun and unique introduction activity for students in an asynchronous course online. And it did, and it gave me some things. I actually think I did a mashup of all the different ideas and came up with one. And I've had a number of students already do it, and I'm printing them out and I'm taping them on my wall, my Hall of Fame of students in a unique way that they've introduced themselves to this online class. So that's me. I'm a convert. I don't believe that it's possible, but it is. I'm here to tell you that there is ways to work with this and make it fun, still holding students very accountable for what they're doing, and yet recognizing that it's just here to stay.
Absolutely. And I'm Dr. Carmenaty. I'm also criminal justice, and I get to work with these wonderful folks here. And I am quickly reminded about some of the things that I was learning way back when. And, we have been dealing with the struggles with technology for a lot of years. Back in the 1960s, there was actually a book written about the different stages of technology adopters. And it's so funny to see that it's still true today. Okay. So the 5 stages are innovators. These are the ones that are they hear about it, they jump on board, and they're off and running, right? And they don't want to wait to see, like, what are the gaps and what ifs and all of that. They don't care. They just go right into it, right? And then we have the early adopters. These are the ones that have already kind of taken a look at it. Yeah, I can see where this might be useful for me. And then the early majority, which are the folks that have already kind of tested, proved, okay, this might work okay for me. The late majority and the laggards are really the folks that just kind of have to wait a couple of years before, let's see all the fallout about that particular technology, because it might not even stick around long enough to be anything. And it's just interesting that we find ourselves in these particular crossroads. And I think, as having served as a law enforcement officer myself, I always kind of go, okay, so how do we develop those rules, right? How do we manage this environment? I don't consider myself an innovator. I'm not the first person to jump in, but I'm definitely an early adopter. I go out and I do the iPhone when it comes out and all of that. And so I'm always trying to figure out, like, how can I utilize this technology to help advance whatever it is that we're working on. And for my students, first of all, I love that our department, we actually came together and collaboratively decided this is going to be our policy for our discipline. This is how we're going to follow it. And also, as a department, we decided that we were going to embrace this technology. I mean, really, in reality, we don't have a choice. It's here, and it's available to us. And the way that I've utilized it in my classroom, because I'm just such a rule follower, I tell them, go ahead and get in there and work with it. It will help you. But what I want you to do is I want you to verify that information. Right. So we're kind of doing the reverse. It's like, ask the questions to technology. Now go back and see if we can validate that information somehow. Is there something in our readings? Is there something in the library that we can find that can help us to validate that information? In some cases, it's such general information that maybe it's not even necessary. But if anything, it's teaching them to not take everything that is written or spoken. Don't take any of that for granted. Make sure that you find a filtering system for that, right? And I think overall it just kind of helps the student to be a little bit more well-rounded in the classroom. And I got to tell you, I am very surprised that I actually have a big chunk of my students that don't want to go in there and look at ChatGPT and all of this other stuff. They just don't. And so in a lot of ways, what I'm finding that I'm having to do is I'm having to create these in-class assignments to give them the courage to do that. Most recently, I had them, because this is the other thing that I found, in-class assignments, they're time savers, because in a lot of cases, so I gave them a list of, okay, here we go, the criminal justice part. I gave them a list of serial killers. And I said, and the purpose of that particular assignment was to identify behaviors that might have contributed towards their criminality, right? But of course, if we're trying to do a web search, it takes a long time to identify all of these behaviors. It really cut down on the amount of time that they needed to spend online searching these behaviors, to the point where we were able to make those connections in class and were able to do it within the time limits that we had. It's a very effective exercise. So that's been my experience so far.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. And I think, like you mentioned, AI is here. And not only is it here, it's integrated into the tools we're already using every day, into Google, into Microsoft, into Outlook, into Zoom. And so now it's also a matter of just helping ourselves become more educated on those tools and how to use them effectively, but also our students. So for example, in my class, we practice prompt engineering. That is a skill set these students are going to need to have in their professional careers and in their lives moving forward. So we practice how to write good prompts. Prompt engineering is really essential. And also, at least in my class, I have them actually cite the prompt they use to collect any information. So that's how I'm currently having them cite any AI generated content, is just include your prompt along with your reference list. So that way, if I literally wanted to cut and paste and put their prompt into that AI generated tool, I would be able to pull up exactly what they were given as well. Are there others who, yeah, go ahead. Here, I think Eugene's sharing. What are some other ways folks are using AI in ways to enhance this learning for our students?
Just real quick, I did following kind of on James's information with regard to the AI. So in Bing, you can actually add in the image. So I thought I'd practice that and go along with what Amber was saying. Grab the prompt. Hey, here's a picture. Tell me what it's about. It gave me these results. Here's the results. Give me a 15-minute lesson on just the first, the second, third, and fourth, and then combine them using this thing I didn't know anything about, Gagnon's 9 events of instruction with emergent learning. And then it gave me all of this stuff. And then I said, hey, give me put this into a table format, and it did. Hey, now give me a script for a podcast, and it gave me this. And then give me an assessment, and it took that same information and broke all this down for me quite simply. And then on and on and on. And so you can, if you're not careful, you can travel down the rabbit hole pretty quickly. And so that's one of the, I guess, the cautions that I put out there to you. Know what it is you want to look for. Otherwise, you'll be like in the library and become a bibliophile, and you just be there for forever.
Well, and I think that's such a great point too, is know what you want, know how you want to use the AI. So for example, I'm not going to submit an unpublished article that I've been working on, to AI to auto, to grammatically correct for me, because I don't want that content out there prior to publication. However, if I'm stuck on what is a great outline I could use for the video script I'm trying to create, or what might be, a start for some research I need to pull, and then I can validate or verify. Those are ways I can use it just for my own practice and research and that type of thing. Eugene, I love what you just shared and how you can really crawl down that rabbit hole if you'd like. Are there others? And again, I know we're over time, but for those who would like to remain on until the hour at 1 o'clock, let's just open this up for conversation. I think Kathy Howe has her hand raised, and then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing. I would categorize myself as a really new, just initial playing around. I attended a conference that I helped organize over fall break, and we put the question out there because it was a bunch of literacy teacher educators to say, what do we know and what should we be thinking about relative to AI? And it generated some examples. I mean, I was excited about them, but now as I go back and look, they're like initial stages and great ideas and great potentials. And then I'm motivated to go back. This article I've been working on with two other, they teach teacher prep technology classes. And we've been working on this article, and they roped me into it as the literacy person, like in knowing, I mean, I like technology, but I'm not the expert. And so they wanted me to play around with planning for literacy, which I think would work great with this AI as well. But it was tech infused lessons using a theoretical model, PICRAC. And that has really just changed how I think about using technology in planning any sort of lesson, and particularly if you're a beginner, because it gives you a framework to think about what is it that the teacher is trying to do with technology across the continuum, and then what are the students, what are you trying to have them do? From like at the lowest level, students, you're using technology to replace something, and students are passively you're using it as the teacher, and the students are more passive. And then it goes up with they're more interactive, you're asking them to create, versus I'm amplifying what I'm having them do, and then I'm transforming the learning. So it fills in this grid, so it guides. I mean, there's just a lot. You've got to think about what are your goals, your instructional goals. Then the hard one, like I was writing down from today, what are the what's the instructional technique, the pedagogy you want to use? And then finally, what's the tool? And that, as they change so much and fast, like I'm like, okay, what's Claude? What's AI? I mean, I just learned a couple weeks, so I'm playing around with Gamma and finally playing around with Chat GPT. So keeping track of all of those is like, a challenge, and then keeping track of your own standards and then trying to have the two come together. So I'm excited to pick up some new ones to go explore, because I feel like once you can put it in a frame of what you're trying to do in your own content area and the types of lessons you do, just kind of weaving in that technology, now artificial intelligence as that technology, it's cool. I mean, just the little I've played around with it, now I'm motivated. You can see how you're using it at a lower level, and then start thinking about how you want to use it at a higher level for students instead of just transforming. So anyway, it was fun. Thank you.
Are there other questions or examples, even from the audience, that you guys would like to share in your own practice, or questions that you have for our panel or for James?
I just want to say thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I'm excited.
All right, well, thank you all so much for joining. Again, I apologize that we went a little bit over time, but there's so much to cover. I think 45 minutes was clearly not enough time. And this is part 2 from last spring. So I really appreciate you guys. For those of you who weren't able to attend last spring, we still have all of the information and resources available, including sample policies for AI for your syllabi, including different examples. That is all on our website. I put the link in to the chat. So again, we hope you will continue to explore, learn about this space, connect with our amazing faculty panelists who were here and part of this discussion today. Feel free to reach out to myself or James as well. And again, just thank you so much as we all continue on this learning journey and exploration into AI and ways that it can be meaningfully and purposefully used in our practices. So thanks so much for attending, and hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.